Hello and welcome to another Tuesday Talk with Ruby Reese. My name is Killian. I'm co-founder at Ruby Reese and I will also be your host. This week we decided to mix things up a little bit. I will be having Chris from Dognutrition.ie. It's our nutritional consulting arm of Ruby Reese, and we're partners in crime, partners in business, with Ruby Reese and with Dog Nutrition, of course. Both Chris and I are certified canine nutritionists, and I suppose many of our regular listeners won't realize that Chris plays such a key role in creating this podcast every week off camera. So I suppose I do the easy part where I'm speaking with our wonderful guests and doing the on camera part, but Chris actually spends way more time than I do in the background, editing the videos and the audio, getting them uploaded to all the platforms that they do, making clips, and getting those online. So Chris actually is probably spends an awful lot more time on the podcast than I do, and I get all the credit. So this week I've decided that it's a good idea or we've both decided that it's a good idea to share some of our own knowledge. I went and did two different courses from North America on canine nutrition, and Chris is certified from Austria in canine nutrition. So we've decided to come together and start breaking things down. If the feedback's good from this session, we are more than happy to come back every now and then and kind of pick at different pieces of dog nutrition, because it is quite a broad topic, but we'd love to help people out if they're interested in kind of broad, wide topics to do with nutrition. We'd be more than happy to come on and chat with people, or chat with each other and share with people what we know. So without further ado, I think it's worthwhile now that I let you listen in to the chat that Chris and I had all about different types of dog foods, because of course in nutrition, the different categories of dog food can be quite confusing, and there's a lot of them out there, and actually once you break it down, it might not be so complicated. So hopefully this is helpful for you, at least to get some kind of structure to your thoughts about dog food and the rest of it. So without further ado, enjoy listening to the chat that Chris and I had. Hello, Chris. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. How are you doing?
Very good. Very good. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. So I suppose maybe you'd do us the pleasure of introducing yourself for those people that might not know you yet.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Chris. I'm a certified canine nutritionist, and I'm co-founder of Ruby Reese and of Dognutrition.ie together with Killian.
What a surprise. I'm also co-founder of this. Okay, brilliant. So we're here today to break down a little bit of what dog food is all about, because I think nutrition is one of those, or when we were speaking, we were saying nutrition is one of those areas in the dog world that's, maybe sometimes seen as extremely complex, and we want to maybe break it down into some of its easiest parts. So maybe some of the things that we're saying today are going to be generalizations. We're going to be trying to put labels on like some of the gray areas, but we're just doing our best to kind of break it down and make it a bit more accessible for everyone. So
yeah, absolutely. And this is such a big topic. You couldn't even cover it in an hour. I think it takes way longer, but we try our best, right?
Exactly. And I think like there's going to be lots of different opinions around feeding, and I think people are very, very passionate about it because they care. So I think lots and lots of people, the more they care about dogs and the more they read into kind of the philosophies that they believe in, the more difficult it can be to kind of even consider that there are other options out there. So we're trying to stay kind of give a bit of a broad overview and kind of give people a better idea of what's even out there. And maybe a good place to start is, do we even think that there's a best way to feed dogs out there?
Yeah, this is, as you know yourself, it's a funny question. I think if you ask 10 dog owners, you will get 20 different answers. And
Yeah.
so, yes and no. I think there's not a better category than the others. So all of these categories has pro and cons. I would say within these little categories, let's say it, we will talk about them in a moment. There are definitely big quality differences, but you can't say, look, a kibble is better than a wet food and is better than a semi-moist or something. This is something you can't say because it has to fit the owner's lifestyle, the dog's lifestyle, and it has to be suitable, right?
and
These things.
and this is it. Like, I think something that comes up on this podcast probably more than most podcasts is how much dogs are individuals. And this is across the board. This isn't just something about nutrition or something just about us. This comes from the areas of physiotherapy, of veterinary, of grooming, of behavior, of training. Like, it's just, our dogs are individuals and we have to respect that. So some dogs will not be able to, or will not be suited for specific types of feeding. Some of these processes are really good at doing certain things, be that preserving things for a long time, preserving the nutritional quality, for being able to work with a specific range of ingredients.
Yeah,
So, like, you just need to say, what makes something better and how are you measuring that, is going to be different for different people. So,
absolutely. And some might say, if you, for example, compare raw food to a kibble, if you have a baby which just learns to crawl, perhaps you would say, look, the dog has his food in the bowl the whole day. If this is good or not, we don't have to talk about this now, but it's not suitable with the baby. So a kibble perhaps is better. Like, there are so many things you have to consider in these things. But like, if you decide for a specific type of food, then you can definitely have a look into the quality differences.
and let's hit that nail right on the head now as well. Like,
Yeah.
we've been talking to a lot of people recently about the price of food. Do we think that price is a good indicator of quality?
And also, I hate to say this again, yes and no.
Yeah.
You have to see, like, if you have a really cheap dog food, let's say from the discounter, right? Then you have to be aware that with this amount of money, you can just make it this far, right? You have to have some quality. Yeah, you have to decrease the quality on some point, even if it's the quality of the ingredient itself, or just cheaper ingredients at all, or, like, for example, using a lot of grain or something, right? So to come to this price point, does it mean that price is always a good indicator? No, because on the other end of the scale, expensive don't mean necessarily good.
Yeah. If someone has a really good brand, but might not have the
Yeah.
best ingredients, then they might still be quite expensive. Yeah, exactly.
They
So
definitely
there's,
have a good marketing then, yeah, but
yeah,
doesn't have to be the best food.
exactly. Um, and do we maybe want to hit on just the absolute basics of nutrition as well? Um,
Absolutely.
like, we expect different things from nutrition. So what do dogs need from their nutrition?
Yeah, first of all, energy.
Yeah.
Energy, I think, is the most important factor for all these foods. So the dog has the energy to maintain the body, the organs, the brain, and yeah, to make movement possible and all these things. So energy is the most important part of it. Yeah, but just with energy, that's not enough.
Exactly. So let's stay on the energy part first. So, when we're talking about the energy part, we're talking about basically fat, carbohydrate, and protein, right? Those are the
These are the three,
basic building blocks.
exactly. These are the three parts, or three nutritions a dog can source energy of. Yeah.
And once you've worked it out, what your dog needs for a perfect energy, then if you go above that, your dog is likely to be gaining weight, and if you're going below that over time, your dog is likely to be underweight. Oversimplification of everything, because that is
Absolute. This is the this is the basic principle of it. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And we'll know that ourselves, maybe around Christmas time or, special times of the year, our birthdays, Ramadan, whatever it happens to be. We can gain and lose weight quickly, if we're going over and under that. So, moving on from that basic simplification, then we need to get other things rather than energy from our foods. Do you want to talk to that as well?
Yeah, then we talk about macro and micronutrients,
Mhm.
which is just, I mean, nutrients at all. Macro just means we need a lot of it. Micro, we don't need a lot of it, but all of them are essential. Let's have a few examples. For example, calcium and phosphorus, iron, copper, zinc. These things are the macro and micronutrients. And
Yeah,
then the next big thing is the vitamins, which some of them are essential for dogs. We have to give them with the food. Some are not. For example, vitamin C. I mean, we can give this extra with the food, but the dog can
yeah,
produce it. Dogs can produce it themselves. And then we have the amino acids, which
yeah.
we have to include as well.
Yeah, because you've got I mean, fats. All fats are not made equally, and all proteins are not made equally, and neither are the
Exactly.
carbohydrates. So you're getting different things from all of these. And without going into too much detail about essential fatty acids and things like that, there you
Yeah.
need different types of fats. You need different types of kind of the building blocks of proteins so that your bodies can function, and that works for human and for dogs.
Exactly, and this is just because the dog's body is made of all these little things, like little nutrients. The dog's body is made of them, so we have to include them in the diet.
And without getting too much further into the basics of nutrition, a lot of these elements work together as well, right? So your number, like different numbers of vitamins work together. Some of the essential acids, they kind of work as you need all of them. So the one of them might control
Oh,
the
absolutely,
maximum amount of absorption of the rest, kind of thing. So you need definitely to have, and I think this is where it adds complexity to our dogs' diets as
absolutely.
well.
I mean,
Yeah.
a good example there is, for example, the calcium, phosphorus, vitamin D um, group of things, because none of them works without the other, and
Mhm.
then they have to be, and this is so crucial, in the right ratio. So if something is too much, and like it's highly complicated, and this is not the only one. There's way more of these things in the body, and we definitely don't have enough time to talk about them all.
Yeah. So just to kind of move on a little bit from the basics now of nutrition, we all understand that there's kind of lots of things to look at. I think it's worthwhile noting you need to look at lots and lots of different things. It's not just the case of, oh, that's a high protein food, so it's going to be great for my dog. It's just, and of course, heat heat and oxygen tend to kind of impact how all of these things are able to be absorbed by the body
Yeah.
as well. So now we move more into how foods are processed, what foods are on the market, and the different categories that you mentioned earlier. So I suppose let's start off with kibble, a word that we hear a lot.
Yeah.
Kibble is There's different types of kibble, aren't there?
In
Do you
the
want to
end,
talk
in
to
the
that?
end, kibble means just dry food.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
we say kibble, but the category would be dry dog food. And yeah, you have different methods of making dry dog food. There's the extrusion method, which is the most common one, I would say. Is like you dry all the ingredients and then you press them um, at 121 degrees or 120 degrees with a pressure of 1 bar. And then we get this nice little nuggets or kibble forms we know. And then we have which is often marketed as the better method, the cold pressed. which starts the same. You have to, in the end, you have to dry all the ingredients, and then you press them at 90 degrees with higher pressure. And then in the end, you get, I think most of the people would better know it as pellets, right?
Exactly. So with Ireland being such, so connected with the agricultural world here, I think you're bound to know someone, be it your grandfather, your grandmother, your aunt, your uncle, or you yourself, connected somehow with kind of more agricultural or equine worlds, and you probably know these things as pellets. I mean, it's horse
Yeah.
pellets, chicken pellets.
Hmm.
You look at the form of that, and you look at the form of your cold pressed food. There you go. It's normally very they're exactly the same shape as each other. You've clearly been pressed through a die, and it normally has kind of a hard coating, and that's coming from the pressure and the heat
Yeah.
on the outside. The heat on the
Normally very
outside.
blank and shiny on the outside. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So your cold pressed is your pellet. They can be good for preserving some of the, for example, the plant oils and things like that.
Yeah.
It's a very, very old method of production. It's not new and shiny like some of the marketing might have you believe. And
But it's getting, I mean, this is fact, it's getting more and more introduced in the market again. So people rediscovering it
yeah,
as a
definitely.
production method.
So it can be a very positive method to use if the ingredients are good. It's great. Um, I find it's a little bit of a misnomer when we're talking about cold pressed, because 90 degrees is nearly boiling temperature water. So
Plus, all the ingredients has to be cooked or dried beforehand. So, and you can't dry at 90 degrees. So, I don't know.
it's likely, yeah, it's likely that a lot of the ingredients have already been treated at a much higher temperature. Of course, you could put in freeze dried ingredients, for example, that we'll get onto later into a pellet form, I'm sure. But yeah, I think by and large, it's it'll be down to the manufacturer to use
Yeah.
these correctly and use these methods with good ingredients. Um, so we have that. We have extruded. There's also baked. Baked is an interesting one.
Baked is just, I think it's the same method, just without pressure. So
Yeah,
you put, in the end, you put little pieces of whatever you want to include in the food and just bake them, and then they're getting dry and hard.
yeah.
Um,
I think you can play with
I think it's a little
temperature.
bit like air dried with another temperature. Air dried would be another one there as well. Not very common, but this is out there as well.
They're really
Um,
expensive methods. Baking is an expensive method of food
they are,
production.
because they're highly and they're not really energy efficient. They are not. It's like you would make your own little dog treats at home in the oven. This is actually the thing you do, just in a bigger, yeah,
On a larger scale.
in a larger
Yeah.
scale. Exactly. Yeah.
So I suppose the commonalities with a lot of these foods is they're going to be quite carbohydrate heavy a lot of the time to hold them together. Maybe less so with the cold pressed. But for the other
Yeah.
types, I think the binding agent is going to be quite carby, so that could be a letdown for some people, depending on what else is in the food.
Yeah.
And we also already mentioned freeze dried. So do you want to talk to that? I know that the process involves freezing, obviously,
Yeah.
and then
So the process is very expensive,
Mhm.
but very good in terms of preserving the nutrients of the ingredients you put in the dog food. So you basically freeze the ingredients and put them in a vacuum, and then it's an effect which is hard to explain, but um, the water is going from a frozen state right um,
gas.
into gas
Exactly.
without
So it's
getting liquid again. So the only thing is it extrudes all the water from it without heating it or putting pressure on it. Um, so basically, if you just add water to the ingredients or to the freeze-dried food again, it just absorbs the water again, and then it gets back to the normal ingredients you put in there. It's a fascinating process, but it takes a big machine. A vacuum is really hard to get, so it really takes it needs a lot of energy to make these foods.
Yeah, exactly. And the process is sublimation. So if you want to look that up, it's fascinating, and it's quite difficult to kind of describe in words. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting one. But like you mentioned, it preserves an awful lot of the nutrients, and even sometimes like the shape as well. So they tend to be very light pieces of exactly the same shape that were put into
the
the
shape
dryer.
doesn't change at all. It's just the same shape, just dried. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then we also have the wet and tinned foods, and they're also really interesting, I suppose. One of the things that stood out for us with the wet foods and the tinned foods is the huge variation in quality. So I think here in Ireland, I think we might have had the whole category ruined by a couple of bad actors that were putting
Okay.
really
Yeah.
low quality foods, particularly in on the supermarket and the pet shop shelves. Um, but I suppose overall, it could be a great option. I mean, we've seen abroad. We've lived
Absolutely.
in Germany and had Ruby in her puppy and young dog stages in Germany. Some of the tinned and wet foods, I suppose the non-tinned wet foods. I mean, they might come in a jar or a glass jar.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of them can be really, really good. And one of the advantages, I guess, is that you don't need these crazy binding agents like the carbohydrates. You don't necessarily need a huge potato starch percentage or a huge grain
Oh
percentage
yeah.
to keep these together, because they come already in a in some sort of a
Yeah.
can.
In the end, if you look at the process, you put everything into a can, then you cook the can, and that's it. And then it's preserved for ages. Um, it's like when it comes to long preserved foods and handy foods, um, this is a great way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I suppose it can be a great option as well for those that are looking at home cooked or at raw and saying, oh, but we love to travel, or we go off in the camper van, every weekend during the summer or whatever. This could be a great
Yeah,
option to kind of like just help kind of bridge the gaps where it might be difficult to feed the way you might like to feed. So they can be really, really
absolutely. Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
And that you
And
don't need, as you already said, you don't need a binding agent. So it is just the ingredients and you just cook them. Yeah.
yeah, and I suppose as a slight aside from all the different methods for a second, you mentioned you have to cook it. So just to break things down for people and make it really, really simple, if you're leaving meat outside, even in a raw state or in a slightly cooked state, if you're leaving this in the countertop for for a couple of days, you'll know what happens, right? So it's
Yeah.
like you have to be able to, these products do need to be shelf stable somehow, or they need to be, you need to be able to work with them. It's not going to get to, you're not going to be going out to a farm or to a butcher every single day. If you are, great. That's another method, but it's not really feasible for most people.
In the end, to make something or to preserve something, they're actually basically just four ways to do it. You
Mhm.
dry it.
Yeah,
You lose a lot of salt or sugar, which is a preservation method as well. Then the pasteurization or the cooking, which is the tin, and then the freezing. These are the four methods. So one of them you have to use.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, so going back to the I suppose the wet and the tinned variations, these can also be great options for dogs that are really bad at drinking and you're worried about them getting dehydrated as well. So that's something to think about, because I know that our Ruby, for example, isn't brilliant at drinking water, so it could be a good option. And then I suppose talking about moisture quantity, we might as well move on to raw.
Yeah.
What do we think about raw?
So raw is considered to stay objective the most natural way to feed your dog. It is in the end how the dog or the wolf would eat in the nature. To having a lot of meat, a little bit of vegetables, and that's it. That's the raw feeding method. And there, within this raw feeding method, there are a lot of how do we want to call it? Ways to
Philosophies.
do it.
I think,
Philosophies.
yeah,
Yeah, that's philosophies. It's a good way to
there's so
explain it.
many different philosophies because there's kind of whole prey method. I'm not going to go into.
Bath.
There's barf. There's lots and lots of different
Yeah.
options here, and these are something that we would be able to discuss with people on a one-to-one basis. But it's
Yeah,
in
definitely.
the end, it's definitely focusing on the fact that that dogs don't eat a huge amount of carbohydrates when left to their
Yeah.
own devices. Wolves never ate a whole lot of carbohydrates. Of course, dogs can eat some carbs and can digest some carbs to varying extents, but I mean, it's
Some better
very
than
clear.
others.
And it's very
Yeah.
clear that dogs, at least in the past, and when left to their own free will usually kind of migrate back towards a carnivore heavy diet. So that's all about raw, and of course a lot of raw food is or actually all raw food is dependent on refrigeration or of course on freezing
Freezing. Yeah.
to have the longer
Yeah.
term. Yeah.
It's a less processed way to feed your dog.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
then you of course have a little bit. It's a little bit of I always call it a variation of raw feeding is the cooked dog food. Yeah, in
But
the
I suppose
end.
home cooked would be, yeah.
Home cooked. Yeah, home cooked. Yeah, that's so called home cooked.
Exactly. So home cooked food obviously is in the name. You're kind of preparing a meal for your dog yourself, but I think with home cooked and with raw, it's either worthwhile being an absolute nerd and figuring it all out on your own and trying to put together a really, really good diet, or speaking to a professional and getting professional help on it. Because I remember at an event last year I was asked about someone said, could I just go to the supermarket and buy high quality ingredients and then prepare a meal for my dog
Yeah,
myself? And the
put them
answer
all
again,
together.
the answer is yes, definitely. But
You could do this. Yeah.
you could throw hazard to the wind and just say, or caution to the wind and just say, let's give it a go and see what happens. You're unlikely to come out with a very balanced diet that way. Particularly if you're influenced by what's good for a human diet, because we certainly have different needs than a dog. But I think for raw and for home cooked, it's worthwhile either getting very nerdy or saving yourself some time and working with a professional. Yeah.
The thing is, you especially with this is a big difference between commercial foods and homemade foods. Is the commercial foods has to give your dog everything they need to survive. Doesn't has to be necessarily the ideal amount of everything, but to survive. This is
Survive and not thrive. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. But with the home cooked one, you have to make sure that all the ingredients are, or like nutritional needs are met. Let's say it like this. And this is something which you said before, like you have to be a really, really nerd, like we are, a professional, or you have to go to a professional and get help.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to make it right. Even for us, sometimes it's tricky as professionals. And if you just buy things from the supermarket, you will definitely miss nutrients your dog needs.
And this is it. It's not scaremongering to say
No,
that this is
not at
really
all.
particularly difficult. It's just there's a lot of elements and moving pieces to think about. So once you have that kind of down and understand how all of the pieces work individually and together, it's actually not a complicated way of feeding. So it's definitely not something that people can't do, but it's something that would definitely help to have a little bit of insight in how to structure the whole thing. So yeah, that's definitely worthwhile. And then of course we have some brilliant options on the markets both in Ireland and the UK and mainland Europe for cooked meals as well, right? So I suppose there's a lot of brands that come in under this label now as well in recent years.
The idea behind this is it's an inconvenient idea to make they cooked meals for dogs so the owner doesn't have to do it themselves. It's not the complete same, I would say, as a home cooked diet because you don't have the whole control over the ingredients. But some of them are using quite high quality ingredients. So yeah.
And that's it. That's always going to be the huge deciding factor here is doing something yourself obviously gives you so much control. It gives you so many options, but that can also be quite difficult for people to have so many options and have to make those choices.
Yeah.
So it's great to have someone that then goes and prepares this for you, while understanding how to balance things. But then again, maybe you don't like some of the ingredients, so maybe you prefer another mode. So there's something out there for everyone. And I think we've covered quite a lot of the different types of food and their manufacturing processes now, right?
One I think we missed. There's some of them out there is semi-moist.
Okay.
Semi-moist is actually a little bit like Kibble extruded. I think this is the only category where I would say I'm not a big fan of it, because you need a lot of conservatives, like chemically conservatives in the food to preserve it. So yeah.
And again, there may be brilliant ones out there on the market, but as a whole, it's a difficult topic. Let's say
it's a difficult one. Yeah.
It's a difficult one on the area of preservatives. Like we said, there's going to be outliers in all of the categories. There's going to be kind of ways and means of doing things with with particular ingredients or stepping a little bit further in one specific direction of a feeding method. But like to generalize, I think we've done a pretty comprehensive look at what's out there and what might be there.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think to wrap things up, it's there's definitely so much to feeding dogs. It can be complicated when you don't know what the different elements are. I hope we've done a good job.
Understand. I mean, we know it from our own history, but I really understand dog owners that this whole world can be so complicated, and there's so many opinions out there, and you will find even professionals who say, "Oh, there is." Just raw is the thing, and you will find others, like other people say, look, kibble is the only way to properly feed your dog, and it's really hard out there.
Exactly. So I suppose what we're trying to achieve with Dognutrition.ie is definitely to have a safe space for everything. I think there's place in the market for absolutely everything. I think there's ways to feed your dog well with with any budget or with most budgets.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that I think also, or we think that that it's important to, that there's space for a lot of these different things, and that shaming people because of feeding one way or another is not going to bring progress to the society, our little dog community. I think that there's definitely space for almost everyone to improve their dog's diet. We know it ourselves that
Yeah.
there's areas that you can improve here and there, and definitely see the difference in your dog's coat then once it's lovely and shiny from making slight changes and turning them into habits. And I suppose it's more of um, a a thing where you need to look at your own individual dog, bring it back to that, and and see what their needs are, right?
Absolutely. Or we are totally happy to work with everyone and see where they are and where they want to go, and we will find the best solution within their range of abilities.
Exactly. So, without further ado, I'm not going to do a separate outro for this episode just to mix things up. Here on this in this moment, I'm going to ask people to head on over to dognutrition.ie and check out the different plans that we've got going there. You can reach out
Absolutely.
to us via the contact form on that page, and we're more than happy to have a discovery call with you and help you figure out if we might be able to help you further. We are also on
Exactly.
Instagram at dognutrition.ie as well. We kept that one simple. And if you've got questions or comments, please get in touch. We're more than happy to speak with you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thanks a million, and looking forward to seeing everyone back here next Tuesday.